You're listening to The John Gaunt Show. My name's Nick Majerus, and standing in for John, and we're about to speak to a chap who has had his free speech ever so slightly infringed upon over the years. Yeah, brave spaces. You've heard of safe spaces. There's a new idea at universities where they might have the opposite of that. Not a safe space, not a dangerous space, a brave space. Yeah, how brave do you have to be? You have to be able to hear words. That's what we're talking about. Something's going wrong in universities, I'll tell you that right now. And our next contributor is going to explain his experience here. I read about this in the papers, in the Liverpool Echo, actually. And let me give you the headline. Outspoken Mail on Sunday journalist gives talk on the street after refusing Liverpool University terms. Yeah, outspoken Mail on Sunday journalist Peter Hitchens was forced to give an outdoor speech on a soapbox in Liverpool after refusing to sign an intrusive anti-free speech contract with the University of Liverpool. He must have been ready to talk about some really inflammatory stuff there, right? What do you think his topic was that was potentially so offensive? He was going to talk about the war on drugs. Yeah, that's what needed an anti-free speech contract. What's going on in the world? Peter Hitchens, thank you very much for making time for us today. What's going on? Were you giving a speech on a soapbox?
Well, not actually a soapbox, but on a bench next to the rather poignant suitcase memorial, which is in Hope Street, in a very pleasant part of Liverpool. It was a very well-designed spot, actually, for an open-air meeting, but we'll come to that in a moment. The problem was that the university and the student guild, their local version of the student union, told the organizer, Tom Willett, a very courageous and persistent person, that to be allowed to speak on university premises, I would have to agree to the long wodge of conditions which the university applies to all speakers on its premises. And these included allowing, none of these things would necessarily happen, but I would have to agree for them to be observed if they wanted to. They would want to see a copy of my speech in advance, and if they asked for it and I refused, then I would obviously not be able to speak. They suggested that it might be necessary for the police to attend the meeting, for a record of those who attended to be kept. And it just seemed to me that these were not rules which were really compatible with a free society. So I said, thank you very much, I'm not doing that. And Tom Willett, the organizer, to his very great credit, said, all right, we'll hold it anyway on non-university premises, not through university societies, to be free of these arrangements. The problem with that is, of course, that it's quite difficult to find anywhere of that kind, and he did book a hall, but when we got there, the people who'd let it to him failed to turn up, so we couldn't get in. So we just decided to go ahead and have it on the street, which was very successful. The only problem was, if only we'd known it was going to be in the open air, we could have said so, and many more people could have come. As it was, about 70 people who'd bought tickets had come there for the meeting, and I think all of them stayed for the meeting. But obviously nobody else had thought they could get in, because for some days it had been full and the number of tickets had been sold out. I like to think that if I'd announced an open-air meeting, we might have got quite a few more.
You know, I tell you
what...
It's
great fun. I enjoyed myself immensely. But it is ridiculous that these rules are applied.
There's something wonderful about seeing you giving a speech in the street, in some of the photographs, in the paper, and online as well. There's something wonderful about it. But just to pick you up on this, you say that...
open-air meetings are great.
Well, you say...
They're much more stimulating than meetings inside. And also people don't cough all the time, which they do inside.
But Peter, you say that this is something that's applied to all speakers at the university. Now,
I believe so.
Because I wonder...
You'd have to ask them about the absolute details. Yeah. I've got a correspondence trail, which I'm working on at the moment. I will be writing a longer article about it for my blog to explain exactly how it all worked, and the investigations into my past sayings which were undertaken and things like that, to make sure that I was an acceptable person.
You see, that's the thing I'm picking up on, because you and I have spoken before. We've joked about, the hated Peter Hitchens, and you're coming from a right-wing point of view. I wonder, because it does seem to me that free speech, is being attacked for anyone who has a right-wing point of view, whereas you can go proportionately all the way to the left. It doesn't seem to be quite as dangerous.
Well, that's because the left left are the conformists now. They have the control of the culture, and they decide what is the correct and conformist thing to say. And people such as me, who are conservatives and Christians particularly, don't fit in with that. So we have become dissenters, which is odd because my positions were sort of the establishment position, only 50 or 60 years ago, and are now reversed. There has been, as I keep saying, a huge cultural revolution in this country, and I'm now an outsider. Well, I've got no objection to being an outsider, actually. In the current circumstances, I'm quite glad to be an outsider because it means I'm not responsible for the mess we're in, and it makes me more confident in some ways that at some point maybe we might be able to reverse some of these changes. Once people on the conservative wing of society start understanding that they don't actually have any power anymore, they might start seeking some.
But police attending the meeting to see who's going... I mean, that is a police state, is it not? I just can't picture that.
No, that would be taking it too far.
Yeah.
It's a step towards the control of speech. For a start, they only control the premises on the university campus, and what university societies are doing. They couldn't stop me speaking off campus. They couldn't stop me speaking on the street, and so it's the police state could certainly do that. Let's not exaggerate the nature of this thing. A police state is a much worse thing than we've got. What is clear, though, is that the people involved in drawing up these codes don't really understand what freedom of speech is. And they're clueless about how it needs to be defended. And in many cases, for the best of intentions, which are always the source of the worst events in the world, for the best of intentions, they are actually stifling free speech. But to call it a police state would be a wild exaggeration, which I won't take part in.
No, sure, but that's my territory. But let me just say also, I guess one of the things that I think is really good about this, that's the flip side of it, is it illustrates how... What's happened, Peter? You're suddenly really popular with young university students. Like you say, you used to represent the establishment. You seem pretty popular.
There are thousands of students at Liverpool University who would probably not really cross the street but leave a postcode to avoid having anything to do with me. The fact that maybe 70 or 100 or a couple of hundred might want to come and hear me is great. But let's delude ourselves that there is some sort of conservative revolution going on the campuses just because I can get a reasonably sized audience for a harangue. That would be, again, going too far. But sure, it's nice to know that there are people who are interested in listening, in some cases, to views they strongly disagree with. I don't think by any means all the people who came to the meeting had come there to applaud me. In fact, there were some very persistent and quite hostile questioners, which gave the meeting much more of a zing and flavour than it would have had if it had been wholly composed of people who agreed with me. I'm glad of that. I like opposition. It's good to be confronted with people who disagree with you and have and wish to question you. It keeps the mind alive.
It's very much part of the fun, and I think that's what I'm speaking of here, in that there is now a movement online, which I'm sure you're aware of, that conservatism is the new counterculture. It's kind of got an outsider element to it, as you've just mentioned a moment ago. You're kind of an outsider figure now. You've got these characters like Paul Joseph Watson and people like that, very young contributors to the debate who have mass appeal with a younger audience. I find that quite odd. I don't know. I guess you seem underwhelmed by it, and maybe not.
No, I would. I just don't. I don't want to get overexcited. I've done overexcitement in my political life, and I'm past all that now. And I've done optimism as well, and I certainly don't recommend that to anybody. It's not a matter of being under or overwhelmed. I would advise against either. It's just a matter of seeing these things for what they are. Being glad of the good parts about them, but not overestimating their significance. That's all. I just won't do that.
Well, I tell you what I think it is. It's pretty clear to me. This is an attack upon free speech. We are living in times where speech is being silenced, and the sound of silence is quite terrifying. I can see it in all aspects of life. And
I know exactly what you're saying, and I felt for some time, for instance, that the imposition of speech codes in universities, which in some ways is much more serious, the things you can't say, you're not supposed to say, is a threat to free speech and free thought. There isn't any real question about that. But the way in which these things is done, the way in which these things are done is actually, in many cases, very difficult to get people worked up about, because it it has a sort of marshmallow stickiness. It's rather than iron-bound bonds and chains. And so it's much harder both to resist and to get people to say, oh, this is terrible, we can't bear it. If it were done in a straightforward police state way, in which people were dragged off by uniformed officers to the cells for saying the wrong thing, then people would be more aware of what's going on. But those who do these things have learnt from experience. They know that you make martyrs by doing that kind of thing. So they just snag us all in these sticky webs of bureaucracy and regulation, and hope most people won't get worked up. And they're quite successful in that. Most people haven't, for the past 20 years probably, have sustained assaults on free thought in the universities, done or said much about it or objected. There are areas where people are aware of it, but in general, the population of this country isn't aware of the fact that there is an attack on freedom of speech and thought going on. They just don't know. And because they don't know, they don't much care. And if they knew how it was being done, they'd find it, as many people do when they encounter it, quite hard to understand and quite hard to get to grips with. It's like hacking at a fog bank with a cutlass. You haven't really got a strongly identifiable enemy to hit at.
No, that's absolutely right. The cloak of political correctness does not describe the politics, which is correct. And so, as you point out, you have to lance that boil and say this is broadly left-wing censorship of ideas, and whether or not it moves towards an agenda or not, we don't know. But certainly, it serves many people's agendas. Final question for you: when you were speaking to this crowd of students, you said you got some aggressive questioning, which you'd expect.
Well, I wouldn't say aggressive, but just perfectly normally brisk and let's put it like this, not sycophantic.
Yes, but what I was going to say is that for me, doing this kind of job and being known for having potentially right of centre points of view, sometimes in those sorts of situations, because of the internet, I feel occasionally intimidated that people may be a little bit crazy. Did you feel that when you're speaking on the street, expounding your opinions?
No. Most people are not. However bitterly they disagree with you, most people in their hearts are civilized enough to know that you're entitled to have a different opinion, and they'll argue with you about it vigorously and sometimes with some hostility and noisily. And one of the great things about having a Bolshevik training, as I have, is I've done street meetings. I know that the temperature of them can get higher than meetings in air-conditioned rooms with soft chairs where people are sitting down. Well, that's all right. I like that. I think people's minds are more alive in the open air when they're standing up than when they're sitting down in an air-conditioned room, and the sound is deadened. And I'm all in favour of that. It means people are thinking more. And ultimately, my objective in all these things that I do when I write, speak, broadcast is to get people to think more than they otherwise would. And if I've achieved that, the fact that they disagree with me while they're doing it doesn't really matter very much to me.
I think that is a worthwhile aim if you're going to a university. Get people to think more. It's not the aim of everyone who works at a university, but there we are. Peter Hitchens, thank you for joining us. I look forward to your work on Sunday, on the Mail on Sunday. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much.